Zara watched in horror as security dragged her away from the ballroom, her small 6-year-old body thrashing against their grip. Whispers of disruptive and uncontrolled followed her exit. Behind her, Mr. Montgomery collapsed to the marble floor, gasping for breath. Nobody believed the little black girl's warning. Before we dive into this incredible story of courage, prejudice, and unexpected heroism, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you believe children deserve to be heard regardless of their race or background, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Are you ready to discover how a 6-year-old girl's bravery revealed shocking truths that would forever change the lives of everyone involved? Let's begin this remarkable journey. The Westbrook Hotel in Manhattan glittered with chandelier light, reflecting off diamond necklaces and gold cufflinks as New York's elite gathered for the prestigious Montgomery Foundation annual charity gala. 6-year-old Zara Matthews stood quietly in the corner of the bustling kitchen, her bright eyes taking in every detail of the organized chaos around her. She hadn't wanted to come tonight, preferring her books and detective shows, but her mother, Imani Matthews, had no choice but to bring her. "Remember what I told you," Imani whispered, adjusting her server's uniform while kneeling to Zara's eye level. "Stay out of sight, stay quiet, and don't draw attention to yourself. These people don't want to see children like us at their fancy parties." Zara nodded solemnly, understanding the unspoken reality that had been part of her young life already. Her mother worked for Elite Catering, providing service for the wealthiest people in the city, and tonight's event featured Alexander Thornton, the 55-year-old billionaire CEO of Thornton Industries, as the guest of honor. Imani smoothed Zara's dark curls and planted a quick kiss on her forehead before straightening her posture and transforming her expression into the pleasant, neutral mask she wore for clients. "Mrs. Reynolds set up a small area for you behind those supply shelves. You have your books and your quiet toys. I'll check on you whenever I can." As her mother melted into the stream of predominantly black and brown service staff, Zara retreated to her designated corner, a makeshift space hidden from the guests' view. From her vantage point, she could see snippets of the glittering ballroom through the kitchen's swinging doors. The contrast was impossible to miss even to her young eyes. The serving staff moved efficiently, almost invisibly, around predominantly white guests who barely acknowledged their existence. Zara watched as a white woman with a diamond-encrusted necklace snapped her fingers to get her mother's attention, not even looking up, as Imani approached with a tray of champagne. "You people need to be more attentive," the woman commented loudly. "I've been waiting for a drink for nearly 5 minutes." Her mother's face remained impassive, her voice politely apologetic as she offered the tray. "I'm very sorry for the delay, ma'am." Zara's small hands balled into fists at her sides, but she remembered her mother's warnings about staying invisible. This wasn't the first time she'd witnessed such treatment. She noticed other patterns, too. The security personnel watched the black servers more closely, sometimes following them through the room. The white kitchen staff received the easier assignments, while her mother and other black staff were assigned the more physically demanding tasks. When one black server accidentally dropped a tray in the kitchen, the white supervisor threatened termination on the spot. When a white server made the same mistake minutes later, it was dismissed with a casual, "These things happen." Zara's attention was drawn to the main table where Alexander Thornton sat surrounded by business associates and admirers. Despite his stern expression, he carried himself with unmistakable authority, his silver hair perfectly groomed, his tuxedo clearly custom-made. Every few minutes someone would approach, shake his hand deferentially, and exchange brief pleasantries before moving on. His personal assistant, a slender white woman with straight blonde hair, whom Zara heard addressed as Victoria Lambert, hovered attentively nearby, occasionally leaning in to whisper something in his ear. As the evening progressed, Zara grew bored with her books and began to observe the room more carefully, mentally playing detective as she did with her favorite TV shows. That's when she noticed Victoria's strange behavior. While Thornton was engaged in conversation with another guest, Victoria approached his table ostensibly to adjust the place settings. With a quick glance around to ensure no one was watching, she slipped something from her sleeve into his wine glass, a quick movement that would have been missed by anyone not paying close attention. The liquid in the glass briefly clouded before returning to normal. Zara straightened up her detective shows, immediately providing context for what she'd just witnessed. Someone had tampered with Mr. Thornton's drink. She slipped out from her hiding place, trying to find her mother in the sea of identical uniforms. When she finally spotted Imani balancing a heavy tray of desserts, she tugged at her sleeve. "Mom, I just saw that lady put something in the important man's drink," she whispered urgently. Imani's expression tightened. "Zara, what are you doing out here? You know you need to stay hidden." "But Mom, I saw." "Not now, Zara. You and your imagination need to go back to your spot before someone complains. I can't lose this job." Imani's voice was strained, her eyes darting anxiously to make sure no supervisors had noticed her daughter. Frustrated but understanding her mother's concern, Zara retreated, but she couldn't shake what she'd seen. She decided to try another adult. A security guard stood near the kitchen entrance, his posture rigid and alert. Surely he would listen. She approached him cautiously. "Excuse me, sir. I need to tell you something important about Mr. Thornton's drink." The guard looked down at her with immediate suspicion. "How did you get in here, kid? This is a private event." Before she could explain, he was already taking her arm and steering her back toward the kitchen. "Someone's kid is loose in the ballroom," he announced to the kitchen manager, who shot an angry look in Imani's direction. "Keep her out of sight, or you'll both be removed." Once again dismissed without being heard, Zara felt a growing sense of urgency. Through the kitchen doors, she could see Alexander Thornton reaching for the wine glass Victoria had tampered with. The adults wouldn't listen because she was just a little black girl invisible until she caused trouble, and then only seen as a problem. In that moment, Zara made a decision that she knew would have serious consequences. Her mother would be angry. She might get in huge trouble. But she couldn't just watch someone be poisoned, even if he was a rich white man who probably wouldn't give her a second glance on a normal day. With determination beyond her years, Zara slipped past the distracted staff and darted toward the main table, her small feet silent on the plush carpet, her heart pounding in her chest. The crystal chandeliers of the Westbrook Hotel ballroom cast a warm glow over the 500 elegantly dressed guests as Alexander Thornton raised the poisoned wineglass to his lips. Across the room, Zara moved with surprising speed for someone so small, weaving between tables and dodging servers with practiced ease. She could feel eyes beginning to follow her movement. A small black child in a simple blue dress darting through a sea of designer gowns and tuxedos. Whispers rippled in her wake. "Whose child is that? How did she get in here? Someone call security." Zara ignored them all, her focus entirely on reaching Alexander before he drank. She was only feet away when he tilted the glass, the deep red wine approaching his lips. With no time to explain, and no expectation that anyone would listen, Zara launched herself forward with all the force her small body could muster. "Stop!" she cried, colliding with Alexander's arm. The wineglass flew from his grip, shattering against the crisp white tablecloth. Dark red liquid splashed across his expensive tuxedo, and the table looking disturbingly like blood against the white fabric. The entire ballroom froze in shocked silence before erupting into chaos. Alexander jumped to his feet, his face contorting from surprise to anger as he stared down at the little girl responsible for the disruption. "What the hell?" he exclaimed, brushing ineffectually at the spreading stain on his jacket. Security personnel converged on Zara immediately, two large men in black suits grabbing her by the arms. Their grip was painfully tight, fingers digging into her small shoulders. "Someone's trying to poison you." Zara tried to explain, her voice high and desperate. "I saw that lady put something in your drink." She pointed toward Victoria, who had stepped back, her face a perfect mask of professional concern. Alexander Thornton looked from the broken glass to Zara with disbelief. "Poison. What nonsense is this?" Around them, the wealthy patrons had begun to recover from their shock, murmurs of disapproval filling the air. "These people really need to control their children." A woman in diamonds commented loudly enough for everyone to hear. "This is why staff shouldn't bring their kids to work," another added. One of the security guards tightened his grip on Zara's arm, leaning down to mutter, "You people really don't know your place, do you?" The racial undertone wasn't subtle. Imani pushed through the crowd, her face a mixture of horror and mortification as she rushed to her daughter. "I am so sorry, Mr. Thornton," she said, her voice trembling. "Please forgive my daughter. I don't know what got into her." Richard Whitmore, Alexander's longtime friend and business partner, stepped forward from a nearby table, his silver hair and imposing height matching Alexander's own. "This is assault, Alex," he said coldly. "We should press charges. Make an example." His eyes swept dismissively over Zara and Imani. "Can't have people thinking they can approach you like this." Imani's face drained of color. "Please, sir, she's only 6. She's never done anything like this before." Her voice cracked with desperation. "I take full responsibility. Please don't press charges." Alexander adjusted his ruined jacket, his initial anger seemingly tempered by the public spectacle unfolding. "No charges," he decided, clearly conscious of the many eyes watching. "Bad optics. Just get them out of here." He turned to Victoria. "Bring me another glass, would you? And see if someone can do something about this mess." Victoria nodded efficiently. "Right away, sir." "I'll bring you a fresh drink." Her calm demeanor showed no reaction to Zara's accusation. As security began escorting Zara and Imani toward the exit, Zara struggled against their grip. "You have to listen to me. She put something in your drink. She's going to do it again," her small voice carried across the now hushed ballroom. A few uncomfortable chuckles rose from the crowd. "Quite an imagination," someone commented. "Should get that child under control," added another. Alexander shook his head dismissively, already turning back to his important guests. But Zara wasn't done. With a sudden twist, she broke free of the security guard's grip and shouted with all her might. "Someone is trying to poison Mr. Thornton. I saw them put something in his wine." This time, her accusation hung in the air, impossible for anyone to ignore. The wealthy patrons exchanged glances, some amused, others uncomfortable. Victoria, who had been heading toward the bar, stopped mid-stride, her composed expression faltering momentarily. One man in the crowd, slightly different from the others, caught Zara's attention. Unlike the sea of predominantly white faces, he was black, well-dressed in security attire, but with an air of authority that the other guards lacked. The silver pin on his lapel identified him as Marcus Bennett, head of security. He studied Zara with an intensity that suggested he wasn't dismissing her words outright. The moment passed quickly as a supervisor from Elite Catering approached Imani. "You're fired," he said, without preamble. "Clear out your things and leave the premises immediately. You'll receive no reference." Imani's face crumpled, but she straightened her shoulders, years of practiced dignity in the face of injustice evident in her posture. "Yes, sir, I understand." She took Zara's hand firmly. "We're leaving now." As they were escorted toward the service exit, Zara looked back over her shoulder. Through the kitchen doors, she could see Victoria returning to Alexander's table, with a fresh glass of wine, her hand momentarily obscured by her body as she set it down. The little girl's heart sank as she watched Alexander accept the new glass with a nod of thanks. Nobody had listened, nobody had checked the wine, and now there was nothing she could do about it. The night air hit Zara and Imani with a bitter chill as they exited through the service entrance of the Westbrook Hotel, a stark contrast to the warmth of the ballroom they'd left behind. Fat raindrops began to fall from the dark sky, quickly soaking through their light jackets. Imani's face was set in a tight mask of barely controlled emotion as she gripped Zara's hand. "What were you thinking?" she finally asked, her voice breaking. "Do you understand what you've done? I needed that job, Zara. We needed that money." Tears mingled with raindrops on her face. "The rent is due next week, and now I have no job and no reference." Zara tried to explain again, her words tumbling out frantically. "Mom, I really saw that lady put something in his drink. She was acting sneaky, looking around to make sure nobody was watching, and then she put something from her sleeve into his wine. Just like on Detective Dana, when the bad guy poisoned enough." Imani's voice was sharper than Zara had ever heard it. "This isn't one of your TV shows, Zara. This is our life. Real consequences. Real bills we won't be able to pay because you couldn't follow one simple instruction to stay out of sight." Her mother's shoulders slumped as she looked down the rain-slicked street. We can't afford a taxi now. We'll have to take the subway and walk." They had made it halfway down the block, the rain falling harder now, when a commotion behind them caught their attention. Blue and red lights reflected off wet pavement as an ambulance screeched to a halt in front of the Westbrook's main entrance. Paramedics jumped out, rushing equipment through the grand doors. A hotel employee ran past Zara and Imani, talking urgently into a radio. Mr. Thornton collapsed, the man said breathlessly into his device. "Looks serious. They're saying possible heart attack or stroke." Zara froze, her small body tensing as the words registered. "Mom," she whispered, tugging at Imani's hand. "That's the man. The one whose drink I spilled. He collapsed, just like I said he would." Before Imani could respond, Zara pulled away with surprising strength, darting back toward the hotel entrance. "Zara, stop!" Imani called, chasing after her daughter through the rain. Inside the Westbrook, the elegant charity gala had descended into chaos. The grand ballroom, so recently a picture of wealth and refinement, now centered around a fallen figure on the marble floor. Alexander Thornton lay motionless, his face ashen as paramedics worked over him. Guests had been pushed back to form a perimeter, their expressions ranging from shock to morbid fascination. Some recorded the scene with their phones, while others whispered in huddled groups. Victoria Lambert stood near Alexander's side, her face showing appropriate concern, but Zara noticed something else in her expression, a subtle satisfaction that seemed out of place. Security blocked Zara from getting any closer. "Get that kid out of here," one guard snapped, barely glancing at her. "This isn't a circus." Zara tried to explain, her voice rising with frustration. "He was poisoned. I tried to tell everyone." The guard moved to physically remove her when a commanding voice interrupted. "Let her through." Marcus Bennett, the head of security, Zara had noticed earlier, approached with purpose. Unlike the others, he looked directly at Zara, addressing her as a person rather than an inconvenience. "You said you saw someone put something in Mr. Thornton's drink. Can you tell me exactly what you saw?" His tone was serious, respectful, so different from how everyone else had spoken to her that Zara almost couldn't respond from surprise. Imani caught up breathless, putting a protective arm around her daughter. "I'm so sorry for the disruption. We were just leaving." Marcus held up a hand. "Ma'am, your daughter may have important information." He knelt to Zara's level, something no other adult had done all evening. "Please tell me what you saw." With someone finally listening, Zara explained clearly what she had witnessed Victoria, checking to make sure no one was looking. The small object slipped from sleeve to wine glass, the briefly cloudy liquid, and then the same thing happening, with the second glass, after the first was spilled. As she spoke, Marcus's expression became increasingly grave. He nodded to a colleague. "Find the broken glass. See if there's any residue we can test." He turned back to Zara. "You're very observant." "That's a special talent." He straightened up and addressed Imani. "I'd like you both to wait in my office. It's private and comfortable. We may need to ask your daughter more questions." Imani hesitated, years of justified wariness evident in her expression. "Are we in trouble?" "No, ma'am. But your daughter may have just saved Alexander Thornton's life, and someone needs to hear her account while the details are fresh." As they followed Marcus through a service corridor, avoiding the main areas now filled with police and emergency personnel, Zara noticed how differently they were treated in his presence. Staff members who had previously ignored or glared at them now nodded respectfully. In his spacious office, Marcus offered them seats and refreshments before stepping out to coordinate with police. Moments later, the door opened to reveal a detective in plainclothes, his demeanor immediately dismissive as he saw who awaited him. "This is your witness. A kid," he asked Marcus, who had returned with him. "The staff said it was just some disruptive child. We've got real work to do out there." Marcus remained firm. Detective Powell, this young lady, observed suspicious activity directly related to Mr. Powell, Thornton's collapse. "I suggest you take her statement seriously." The detective sighed heavily but pulled out a notepad. "Fine. What's your name, kid?" His tone made it clear he considered this a waste of time. Zara straightened in her chair. "Zara Matthews." "All right, Zara. Tell me what you think you saw." The emphasis on think wasn't subtle. Zara repeated her account more confident now that she'd had time to organize her thoughts. The detective took minimal notes, his expression increasingly skeptical. When she finished, he closed his notepad with a snap. "Look, I appreciate your imagination, but Mr. Thornton is a 60-year-old man with a history of heart problems. The medical team is treating this as a likely cardiac event. We can't go accusing people based on a child's fantasy." Marcus interrupted Detective. "I've already ordered the broken glass collected for testing. Miss Lambert's background is being checked as we speak." Detective Powell's eyebrows rose. "You're taking this seriously." Based on her word, the prejudice was unmistakable in his tone. Before Marcus could respond, a commotion outside drew their attention. Through the office window, they could see Alexander being wheeled rapidly toward the exit, surrounded by medical personnel. Victoria attempted to follow, volunteering to accompany him to the hospital. Marcus quickly excused himself, striding over to intercept. "Miss Lambert, your assistance would be better utilized coordinating from here. I'll send our security liaison to the hospital." Something in his tone left no room for argument. Victoria reluctantly stepped back, her pleasant expression momentarily slipping to reveal frustration. The detective watched this exchange, his own expression thoughtful, before turning back to Imani and Zara. "We'll need formal statements. I'll arrange transport to the hospital where you can speak with officers taking witness accounts." His tone remained skeptical, but at least he was following procedure. As they were escorted to a waiting car, Imani squeezed Zara's hand. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you," she whispered. "You were right all along." She paused, looking around at the police and security personnel, now viewing them with a mixture of curiosity and lingering prejudice. "But baby, you need to understand something important. Even when you're telling the truth, the world doesn't always listen to people who look like us. We have to be prepared for that." Zara nodded solemnly, her young mind processing this painful reality she'd just experienced firsthand. The rain continued to fall as they were driven toward Manhattan Memorial Hospital, the city lights blurred through wet windows. Behind them, the glittering charity gala had transformed into a potential crime scene, all because a 6-year-old girl had refused to remain invisible. Have you ever been in a situation where you knew something important, but adults wouldn't listen because of who you are? Comment number 1. If you've experienced being dismissed or ignored based on your appearance, age, or background, hit that like button and subscribe if you believe every voice deserves to be heard, no matter how small. What do you think will happen at the hospital? Will the authorities finally take Zara's warning seriously, or will prejudice continue to blind them to the truth? Stay tuned as we follow this brave young girl's fight to be heard in a world determined to silence her. Manhattan Memorial Hospital's VIP wing operated by different rules than the overcrowded emergency department 17 floors below. Here the lighting was softer, the nurses more numerous, and privacy was guaranteed for patients wealthy enough to afford it. Alexander Thornton occupied the largest suite, medical equipment incongruously arranged around furnishings more suited to a luxury hotel than a hospital room. Outside his door, 2 private security guards stood alongside a uniformed police officer, checking credentials of anyone seeking entry. Down the hallway, in a small consultation room, with uncomfortable chairs and flickering fluorescent lighting, Zara and Imani waited. They had been there for over 2 hours, occasionally visited by hospital staff who brought water but no information. Through the small window in the door, Zara could see the controlled chaos of Alexander's medical team, consulting with specialists, rushing test results, and coordinating care with an urgency reserved for the extraordinarily wealthy or powerful. The contrast with the emergency department they had passed through was striking. Their predominantly black and brown patients waited hours for basic care. Here, a single patient commanded the attention of the hospital's entire senior staff. The door opened, and Detective Powell entered, his expression marginally less dismissive than before. Behind him followed a lab technician clutching a tablet. "We've got preliminary results on the residue from the wine glass," Powell stated, addressing Imani rather than Zara. "There were traces of a compound consistent with certain poisons. Not conclusive yet, but concerning." He turned to Zara, finally acknowledging her directly. "I need to ask you some more questions. Can you describe again exactly what you saw the woman do with Mr. Thornton's drink?" His tone remained condescending, as if speaking to someone much younger than Zara, but at least he was asking. Zara repeated her account, precisely adding details about Victoria's positioning and movements that she hadn't mentioned before. The detective took more thorough notes this time, occasionally nodding. "And you're certain it was Miss Lambert, the blonde woman who works as Mr. Thornton's assistant?" Zara nodded firmly. "Yes. I heard people calling her Victoria. She did it to both glasses, the one I knocked over and the one she brought after." As they spoke, hospital staff passed by the small room, some casting curious or suspicious glances through the window. A nurse entering to check on them made a barely audible comment to her colleague. "Those people always causing trouble, probably looking for a lawsuit." The words weren't meant for Zara's ears, but she caught them anyway, her young face showing momentary hurt before she composed herself. The consultation room door opened again, this time revealing Marcus Bennett. His presence immediately changed the dynamic in the room, his authority evident in how even Detective Powell straightened slightly. "We have confirmation," Marcus announced without preamble. Both wine glasses contained traces of thallium, a highly toxic heavy metal that mimics the symptoms of heart attack or stroke, difficult to detect without specific testing. He nodded respectfully to Zara. "Thanks to this young lady, we knew what to test for before it was too late." Detective Powell's skepticism visibly wavered. "So the kid was right," Marcus's expression hardened. "Her name is Zara, Detective. And yes, she was entirely correct. Mr. Thornton was poisoned twice. The doctors are treating him with the appropriate antidote now. They believe he'll recover, though it was extremely close." The moment of vindication was short-lived. The door burst open once more to admit Richard Whitmore, Alexander's friend and business partner, who had suggested pressing charges against Zara earlier. His face was flushed with anger as he pointed accusingly. "There they are, the troublemakers." He turned to Detective Powell. "Why are they still here? They should be suspects, not witnesses." Marcus stepped between them. "Mr. Whitmore, these individuals are helping with the investigation." Richard was undeterred. "It's obvious what happened. That child caused a scene, deliberately knocked over Alexander's drink as a distraction. They're probably working with someone inside. It's a shakedown attempt." The racial undertone to his accusation wasn't subtle. Several of Alexander's other business associates had gathered in the hallway, nodding in agreement. It was easier for them to believe a black child and her mother were criminals than accept that someone in their trusted inner circle could be responsible. Mr. Whitmore, Detective Powell, began seemingly uncomfortable with the direction, but not entirely dismissive of the theory. "We have evidence that he was interrupted by the arrival of the hospital's chief of medicine, flanked by 2&T specialists. Mr. Thornton is stabilized," the doctor announced to the gathered group. "He remains unconscious, but his vital signs are improving. We've identified the poison and administered the appropriate treatment. Without early intervention, the outcome would have been fatal." Richard immediately pushed forward. "When can he be moved to a private facility? I don't trust the security here." His eyes flickered meaningfully toward Zara and Imani. The doctors exchanged glances. Moving him would be extremely dangerous in his condition. He needs to remain under constant monitoring for at least 72 hours. As the medical team continued their update, Marcus quietly guided Zara and Imani back into the consultation room, away from Richard's hostile glares. "I don't think it's safe for you to go home tonight," he said in a low voice. "Whoever did this is still out there, and now they know you're a witness, Zara." Imani's face paled. "You think we're in danger? I think caution is warranted. I've arranged a hotel room under a different name. My colleague will escort you there shortly." Before Imani could respond, commotion in the hallway drew their attention. Victoria Lambert had arrived, her professional demeanor perfectly intact despite the late hour. She expressed appropriate concern, asking detailed questions about Alexander's condition. When she noticed Zara watching through the window, her expression flickered briefly, something cold and calculating crossing her features before returning to polished concern. "It's shocking that someone would target Alexander like this," she told the gathered associates. "Thank goodness the doctors knew what to look for." She made no mention of Zara's warning or her own role in serving the drinks. Through a crack in the door, Zara could hear Victoria skillfully redirecting suspicion. Perhaps we should look into the catering company. That child was clearly not supposed to be there. Who knows what else was happening behind the scenes? The suggestion found fertile ground among those already inclined to suspect outsiders rather than one of their own. The night stretched on interminably. Around midnight, Marcus arranged for Zara and Imani to be transported to a nearby hotel. As they prepared to leave through a side exit to avoid media that had begun to gather, Imani's phone rang. The number was blocked. Hesitantly, she answered, putting it on speaker. "Listen carefully," an electronically distorted voice said. "Your daughter needs to forget what she thinks she saw. Kids get hurt when they don't mind their business. Stay quiet if you want to stay safe." The call disconnected before Imani could respond, her hand shaking as she lowered the phone. "That's it," Marcus decided, having overheard. "You're getting police protection starting now." He made a quick call arranging for additional security at the hotel. As they were escorted out, Zara looked back toward Alexander's room. Through the partially open door, she could see the powerful billionaire reduced to a still form connected to machines, his life hanging in the balance because no one had been willing to listen to a little black girl until it was almost too late. In the car to the hotel, Zara asked the question that had been forming in her young mind all evening. Why didn't they believe me? Even when I was telling the truth. Imani stroked her daughter's hair, her eyes sad with the weight of a jar. Reality she'd hoped to protect Zara from for a few more years. Because sometimes people see our skin before they see anything else about us. They decide what we are and what we're worth before we ever open our mouths. Marcus, sitting in the front passenger seat, turned to look at them. His expression was somber but determined. "But that doesn't mean we stop speaking truth," he said firmly. "It just means we have to be stronger, smarter, and more persistent than those who want to silence us." Zara nodded, absorbing this lesson that would shape her understanding of the world. As their car pulled away from the hospital, neither they nor Marcus noticed the black sedan that pulled out to follow them through the rainy Manhattan night. Morning arrived with pale sunlight struggling through heavy clouds, the storm having passed but leaving Manhattan damp and chilled. In room 612 of the Parkview Hotel, Zara awoke disoriented, momentarily confused by the unfamiliar surroundings before remembering the events of the previous night. Her mother sat by the window, speaking quietly on the phone, dark circles under her eyes, suggesting she had barely slept. On the television, muted news coverage showed footage of the Westbrook Hotel with Alexander Thornton's image inset in the corner. The headline scrolled across the bottom, "Billionaire CEO Poisoned at Charity Gala." Imani ended her call and noticed Zara was awake. That was Marcus checking in. "Mr. Thornton is still unconscious but stable. The doctors say he's responding well to treatment." She managed a tired smile. "You saved his life, Zara. If you hadn't spilled that first glass and raised the alarm, they might never have tested for poison until it was too late." Zara slipped out of bed and padded over to the television, turning up the volume slightly. A polished news anchor was mid-sentence. Sources close to the investigation say Thornton Industries CEO Alexander Thornton may have been the target of a deliberate poisoning attempt at last night's charity gala. Police are investigating business rivals and disgruntled former employees. The coverage cut to footage of Detective Powell giving a press conference outside the hospital. "We are pursuing multiple leads and interviewing witnesses. At this time, we cannot confirm specific details about potential suspects or motives." A reporter shouted a question. "Is it true a child first raised the alarm about the poisoning?" Powell's expression tightened. "We are not commenting on witnesses at this time, particularly when minors may be involved." The camera returned to the studio where the anchor continued. "Sources tell us there was some sort of disruption involving a child at the gala shortly before Thornton collapsed. Social media has been buzzing with speculation about what exactly transpired." The coverage shifted to a panel discussion where a conservative political commentator named James Harrington offered his perspective. "Look, this whole child hero narrative being pushed online seems suspicious to me. More likely this was a staged distraction to cover for whoever actually administered the poison." We shouldn't be so quick to celebrate until we know all the facts. Imani clicked off the television with a disgusted sigh. They can't even give you credit when you literally saved someone's life. A knock at their door put both instantly on alert. Imani approached cautiously, checking through the peephole before relaxing slightly. It's Marcus. She opened the door to admit the security chief, who entered carrying a paper bag containing breakfast sandwiches and coffee for Imani, hot chocolate for Zara. "Thought you might be hungry," he said, setting the food on the small table by the window. His expression was serious, but not alarming. "We've made some progress overnight. I wanted to update you personally." As Zara and Imani ate, grateful for the warm food, Marcus shared what the investigation had uncovered. Victoria Lambert's background check revealed several inconsistencies, he began. She claimed to have worked for Mercer Financial for 3 years before joining Thornton Industries, but Mercer has no record of her employment. Her references all check out on paper, but seem to lead to carefully constructed false identities when investigated deeply. He pulled out his phone and showed them a series of photographs. More concerning is this. Our surveillance team caught Victoria meeting with Richard Whitmore 3 times in the past month at locations well away from any business context. Restaurants in different boroughs, a park in Queens, once at a motel off the highway. The photos showed Victoria and Richard in close conversation, clearly not wanting to be observed. In one image, Richard was handing Victoria what appeared to be an envelope. Zara recognized Richard immediately. "That's the man who wanted me to get in trouble. He wanted Mom and me arrested." Marcus nodded grimly. Richard Whitmore has been Alexander's business partner for 20 years and stands to gain significant control if Alexander is incapacitated or dies. But there's more to it than that. He took a deep breath before continuing. Alexander was planning to make a major announcement next week. He's been working with his lawyers to restructure Thornton Industries. The controlling interest would be transferred to the Montgomery Foundation, the charitable organization hosting last night's gala, rather than remaining with the business partners as previously arranged. Imani's eyes widened with understanding. So his partners would lose millions. Billions, Marcus corrected. The restructuring would effectively remove Richard and several other executives from their positions of power and significantly reduce their financial interests. The signing was scheduled for tomorrow morning. He looked at Zara with newfound respect. The timing of the poisoning wasn't accidental. If Alexander had died last night, the new will and corporate structure would never have been implemented. Imani struggled to process the information. So this was about money and power, not just attempted murder. That's usually the case. At this level, Marcus confirmed. "I've been Alexander's head of security for 15 years. I'm one of the few people who knew about the restructuring plans. Alexander has been evolving in his thinking recently." He chose his words, carefully aware of his audience. He built his fortune in real estate development, often in ways that displaced communities of color. For most of his career, he showed little concern for the consequences of his business decisions on marginalized populations. Marcus's expression softened slightly. But something changed in the past year. He began visiting communities affected by his developments, meeting with local leaders, attending memorial services for victims of racial violence. The Montgomery Foundation's new direction, focusing on educational opportunities for underserved communities and addressing housing inequity, reflects this shift. Imani remained skeptical. One billionaire having a conscience doesn't change a system built on inequality. "You're right," Marcus acknowledged. "But billions of dollars redirected toward actual community needs instead of shareholders' pockets, that could make a real difference." And that's exactly what Richard and the others stood to lose. Zara, who had been quietly absorbing the adult conversation, spoke up. "So, what happens now? Will they arrest Victoria?" And Richard Marcus's expression turned cautious. "That's where things get complicated. We have circumstantial evidence, but nothing definitive yet. The poison was administered in a public setting with hundreds of potential witnesses. Richard has significant connections with the police department and district attorney's office. He's already pushing a counter-narrative that this was an attempt to embarrass Alexander by activists opposed to his developments." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "I need your help." Both of you, we need to gather more concrete evidence before Richard and Victoria realize how much we know. Once they understand they're suspects, evidence will start disappearing." Imani straightened in her chair, her protective instincts flaring. "You want to use my 6-year-old daughter as bait, after we've already received threats." "Not as bait," Marcus assured her quickly. "But I do need eyes and ears inside Thornton Industries. I've arranged for you to be hired temporarily in the administrative pool. The company needs extra support while dealing with this crisis." He turned to Zara. "And Thornton Industries has an excellent on-site childcare facility for employees. Many of the children there might have overheard things, seen things. Children notice details adults miss." Zara's eyes lit up with excitement. "Like undercover detectives. Just like on my shows." Imani wasn't nearly as enthusiastic. "This sounds dangerous. These people have already tried to kill once. They threatened us directly." Marcus nodded soberly. "I understand your concerns. But right now you're actually safer where I can see you. If you disappear or go into formal protective custody, Richard will know you're considered valuable witnesses. That makes you bigger targets." He reached into his jacket and removed 2 small objects. "These look like ordinary jewelry pieces, but they contain recording devices. State-of-the-art, undetectable by standard security sweeps." He handed a simple bracelet to Zara and a decorative lapel pin to Imani. "They activate with a double tap and record for up to 8 hours. Imani studied the pin doubtfully. "And if we get caught with these, you won't," Marcus said confidently. "But if something feels wrong, you leave immediately. I'll have a security team nearby at all times." As they discussed the details of the plan, Zara moved to the window, peering down at the street below. A black sedan was parked across from the hotel entrance, a man in sunglasses sitting behind the wheel despite the overcast day. She was about to mention it when the car pulled away, merging into traffic. Marcus joined her at the window, following her gaze. "What is it?" "There was a car watching the hotel," she said, "but it's gone now." Marcus's expression remained neutral, but his eyes scanned the street with increased vigilance, probably nothing but good observation. Always trust your instincts about things that seem out of place. As they prepared to leave for Thornton Industries headquarters, Imani pulled her daughter aside for a private moment. "Zara, listen to me. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, you tell me immediately." "Promise." Zara nodded solemnly. "I promise, Mom. And remember what we talked about. Even when you're right, even when you're telling the truth, some people still won't listen because of who we are. Be careful what you say and who you trust." Zara absorbed her mother's warning, her young face showing a maturity beyond her years. "I understand." As they left the hotel room, Zara clutched her new bracelet, feeling both excited and scared about their undercover mission. She didn't fully grasp the dangers involved, but she understood one thing. Clearly powerful people had tried to silence her once, and they would certainly try again. This time, however, she wasn't alone. Thornton Industries headquarters dominated the Manhattan skyline, 70 stories of gleaming glass and steel that seemed to touch the clouds themselves. The massive atrium lobby featured a 3-story waterfall, and the company's slogan etched in gold letters on black marble, "Building Tomorrow's World Today." Security was visibly enhanced following the attack on the company's CEO, with additional guards scanning visitors and checking credentials. Imani and Zara passed through the security checkpoint with the temporary badges Marcus had arranged. The contrast between the company's public face and its internal structure became immediately apparent as they moved deeper into the building. While the executive floors featured diverse faces in the promotional photos on the walls, the actual employees they encountered told a different story. The higher they went in the elevator, the fewer black and brown faces they saw. By the 40th floor, where Imani was assigned to the executive administrative pool, diversity had all but disappeared. "You must be the new temp," said a brisk white woman in her 50s, introducing herself as Patricia Downing, the executive administrative director. Her gaze lingered disapprovingly on Zara. "We don't normally allow children in the executive offices." "The agency explained my situation," Imani replied evenly, reciting the cover story Marcus had provided. "My regular childcare fell through, and I'll be taking her to the company daycare center once I'm properly checked in." Patricia's lips thinned with displeasure. "See that you do." First impressions matter at Thornton Industries. She led them through an open office area where predominantly white administrative staff worked at identical workstations. "You'll be supporting the crisis management team during Mr. Thornton's absence. Primarily filing correspondence and maintaining meeting minutes. Nothing confidential." Her tone suggested she didn't consider Imani trustworthy with sensitive information. As Patricia oriented Imani to her temporary workspace, a young white woman at a nearby desk kept glancing their way, her expression more curious than hostile. She introduced herself when Patricia stepped away to take a call. "I'm Jenny Aldridge," she said in a hushed voice. "Don't mind Patricia. She treats everyone like they're incompetent, though she's definitely worse with." She trailed off, apparently thinking better of finishing the thought. "Worse with black employees," Imani supplied directly. Jenny flushed but nodded slightly. "Things are especially tense today with everything that's happening. Victoria's on the warpath." She nodded toward a glass-walled office where Victoria Lambert was visible, speaking intensely on the phone. "She's basically running everything with Mr. Thornton in the hospital and Richard Whitmore calling an emergency board meeting." At the mention of the emergency meeting, Imani casually touched the recording device disguised as a lapel pin. After completing the basic orientation, Imani escorted Zara to the company's childcare center on the 10th floor. The facility was impressive with modern educational equipment and a staff-to-child ratio that would make most daycares envious. However, the social dynamics among the children mirrored those of the adults upstairs. The few children of color played separately from the majority white children, a separation that appeared to be enforced more by habit than explicit rules. The child care director, a warm Hispanic woman named Elena Rodriguez, welcomed Zara. "We're happy to have you join us today, Zara. The children are having free playtime now, then we'll have story circle in 30 minutes. As Imani prepared to leave, she knelt to Zara's level, ostensibly to straighten her daughter's clothes, but actually to whisper, "Remember what we discussed. Be careful, observe everything, but don't take unnecessary risks." Zara nodded, understanding the seriousness beneath her mother's casual tone. "I'll be good, Mom, promise." Once Imani returned to the executive floor, she found herself assigned to prepare the boardroom for the emergency meeting. This task, likely given to her because it was considered menial, actually provided the perfect opportunity to position herself where she could overhear crucial conversations. As she arranged notepads and water glasses, she noticed Richard Whitmore had arrived, moving with the confidence of someone accustomed to unquestioned authority. He conferred with Victoria in low tones near the doorway, not bothering to lower his voice around someone he perceived as mere staff. "We need to move quickly," Richard was saying. "The transfer of the West Side properties needs to be completed before Alexander regains consciousness. Once the paperwork is filed, it will be too difficult to reverse even if he objects." Victoria nodded, checking something on her tablet. "The documents are prepared. We just need the executive committee's approval, which is the purpose of today's meeting. The official justification is continuity of operations during leadership transition." "And our other problem?" Richard asked, his voice dropping slightly. Victoria's expression hardened. "Being handled. I have someone watching them. Once we have control of the company secured, they become irrelevant." Imani continued arranging materials, keeping her movements casual, while ensuring the recording device captured every word. As board members began arriving for the meeting, she was dismissed from the room, but not before placing a water pitcher strategically near where Richard and Victoria would be seated. The pitcher concealed another of Marcus's recording devices. Back at her temporary desk, Imani began the mundane filing work she'd been assigned, all while staying alert to movements and conversations around her. Meanwhile, in the child care center, Zara was employing her own investigative skills. During free playtime, she found herself approached by a small blonde girl with curious blue eyes. "You're new," the girl stated matter-of-factly. "I'm Sarah. My grandpa owns this building." Zara introduced herself cautiously, remembering her mother's warnings about being careful what she revealed. "I'm Zara. My mom is working upstairs today." Sarah seemed pleased to have someone new to talk to. "Do you want to see our art corner? I'm making a card for my grandpa because he's sick in the hospital." The information immediately caught Zara's attention. "Your grandpa is Mr. Thornton." Sarah nodded solemnly. "He was supposed to take me to the zoo this weekend, but now he can't. Everyone's being weird and not telling me what happened, but I heard my mom on the phone saying someone tried to hurt him." Zara chose her words carefully. "I'm sorry your grandpa is sick. I hope he gets better soon." "He will," Sarah said with childish certainty. "Grandpa says he's too stubborn to stay down long. He's different now than he used to be, you know." This piqued Zara's curiosity. Different how Sarah considered the question while carefully coloring her get-well card. "He smiles more. He listens when I talk. And he took me to this really important place where lots of people's names were written on a wall. He cried there, and Grandpa never cries." Zara recognized an important clue. "Do you remember what that place was called?" "It was a me something for people who died because of hate." Sarah struggled with the word. "Memorial," Zara suggested. Sarah nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, a memorial for racial violence. That's what Grandpa called it. He said he helped build things that hurt communities, and he needed to make it right." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "He's giving away lots of money to help kids like you go to college. It's supposed to be a secret until next week, but I heard him telling his lawyer." The significance of this information wasn't lost on Zara despite her young age. Alexander Thornton wasn't just restructuring his company, he was fundamentally changing its purpose and his legacy. As they continued talking, Sarah revealed more pieces of the puzzle. Alexander had started a scholarship program for minority students, was planning affordable housing initiatives in neighborhoods. His company had previously gentrified and had been meeting with community leaders from areas impacted by his plan. Past developments. "Richard and Victoria don't like it," Sarah added. "I heard them fighting with Grandpa in his office. Richard said he was betraying their vision and destroying shareholder value." Before they could continue their conversation, Zara noticed Victoria Lambert entering the childcare center ostensibly to check on operations. Her gaze swept the room, stopping abruptly when she recognized Zara. Victoria's composed expression flickered momentarily, revealing shock and anger before she controlled her features. She spoke briefly with Elena. The childcare director then stepped outside to make a phone call. Zara moved closer to the door, pretending to look at a bookshelf while straining to hear Victoria's conversation. "The child is here," Victoria was saying in a low, urgent voice. "At Thornton headquarters. With her mother. Yes, they both need to be dealt with. Tonight would be best. We'll accelerate the timeline." The implications sent a chill through Zara. She casually returned to Sarah, giving her the friendship bracelet she'd been wearing, not the recording device, which remained securely on her other wrist. "I want you to have this," Zara said, "because we're friends now." Sarah was delighted with the simple gift, immediately putting it on and promising eternal friendship with the easy certainty of childhood. When the children were gathered for story time, Zara watched Victoria leave the floor, her purposeful stride, suggesting she was executing a plan rather than simply returning to work. At lunchtime, Imani came to check on Zara, using the opportunity to exchange information in whispered conversation while appearing to simply help her daughter with her meal. "Richard and Victoria are planning to transfer company assets before Mr. Thornton recovers," Imani explained quietly. "They've called an emergency board meeting to authorize leadership changes while he's incapacitated." Zara shared what she had learned from Sarah, particularly about Alexander's change of heart regarding racial equity and community investment. "Victoria saw me," she added. "She made a phone call about dealing with us tonight." Imani's expression tightened with concern. She tapped out a quick text to Marcus, updating him on this new threat. His response was immediate. "Stay where you are. Continue as normal. Security team in place. Meeting you at end of day. Recording devices capturing crucial evidence." They parted again after lunch, each returning to their respective posts. Imani found herself assigned to transcribe notes from the emergency board meeting, which had concluded while she was checking on Zara. This gave her legitimate access to information about the board's decisions, including the temporary appointment of Richard Whitmore as acting CEO, with full authority to execute transactions necessary for business continuity. Back in the childcare center, Zara noticed increased security personnel in the hallways. Whether they were Marcus's people or Richard's was impossible to determine. As the afternoon wore on, the atmosphere throughout the building grew increasingly tense. Employees whispered in corners speculation about Alexander's condition mixed with rumors about the company's future. When the workday finally ended, Imani collected Zara from the childcare center, both of them hyper-alert to their surroundings. Marcus met them in the lobby as promised, his expression revealing nothing as he escorted them to a waiting car. Only when they were safely inside with the doors locked did he speak freely. The recordings picked up crucial evidence he confirmed. Enough to justify a formal investigation into Richard and Victoria. But we need to move quickly. Based on what you've both reported, they're planning to act tonight both against Alexander and against you. As their car pulled away from Thornton Industries headquarters, none of them noticed the black sedan that once again took up position, several cars behind, following at a discreet distance through the Manhattan traffic. Have you ever been in a situation where you noticed something important that adults missed? Comment number 1. If you believe children often see things more clearly because they aren't blinded by adult assumptions. Hit that like button and subscribe if you're inspired by Zara's courage to speak truth despite being dismissed and underestimated. The investigation is revealing darker secrets than anyone imagined, but now Zara and her mother have become targets themselves. Will Marcus's security team be enough to protect them from people willing to commit murder to protect their wealth and power? What final confrontation awaits as they race to save Alexander Thornton from a second assassination attempt? Let's continue this thrilling story of courage, prejudice, and justice. Dusk settled over Manhattan, painting the sky in deepening shades of purple and blue as Marcus drove Imani and Zara toward Manhattan Memorial Hospital. Alexander has been showing signs of regaining consciousness, he explained, navigating through heavy evening traffic. The medical team is optimistic he'll be fully awake by morning. That's why Richard and Victoria are accelerating their timeline. Once Alexander can speak, their entire plan falls apart. In the back seat, Imani held Zara's hand tightly. You've sent the recording evidence to the police, right? Shouldn't they be making arrests already? Marcus's expression was grim as he checked the rearview mirror for the third time in as many minutes. I've submitted everything to Detective Powell, but Richard has significant connections in the department. Powell needs to verify the recordings independently before acting, which means finding a judge willing to sign warrants against one of the most powerful men in the city. That takes time, even with solid evidence. Zara noticed her mother's increasing tension. Are we in danger, Mom? She asked directly. Imani hesitated, clearly torn between reassurance and honesty. We're taking precautions, baby. Marcus is helping keep us safe. And we're going to be even safer once we get Alexander's direct testimony, Marcus added, trying to sound confident. The hospital has increased security around his room since the first poisoning attempt. No one gets in without proper clearance and identification. What they discovered upon arriving at Manhattan Memorial, however, immediately undermined this assurance. The hospital's administrative director, a thin man with nervous hands, met them in a private consultation room rather than allowing them direct access to Alexander's floor. I'm sorry, but Mr. Whitmore has implemented strict protocols regarding Mr. Thornton's visitors, he explained, not quite meeting Marcus's eyes. Only family members and designated executives are permitted access at this time. Marcus's expression darkened. I'm Alexander's head of security. I've been with him for 15 years. Yes, well. The administrator shuffled papers uncomfortably. Mr. Whitmore provided documentation showing that operational control of Thornton Industries has temporarily transferred to him during Mr. Thornton's incapacitation. That includes security protocols. He was quite explicit that you specifically are not to be admitted. Imani stepped forward. What about the police? Surely they're investigating the poisoning attempt. The administrator nodded quickly. Of course. Detective Powell has been granted limited access, but he defers to Mr. Powell of 2, Whitmore, on most security matters given Mr. Whitmore's concern for his friend's well-being. The implications were clear. Richard had effectively barricaded Alexander from anyone who might interfere with their plans. Has Victoria Lambert been admitted to see Mr. Thornton? Marcus asked, already knowing the answer. Miss Lambert has full access as Mr. Thornton's executive assistant, the administrator confirmed. She's been coordinating his care with the medical team. In fact, she's with him now. Alarm flashed across Marcus's face. You need to call Alexander's room immediately. Victoria Lambert is a suspect in his poisoning. The administrator's expression shifted from discomfort to disbelief. That's a very serious accusation. Miss Lambert has been nothing but professional and concerned. Please, Imani interjected, her voice urgent. My daughter witnessed Miss Lambert tampering with Mr. Thornton's drinks at the gala. The police have evidence confirming poison in those drinks. The administrator's gaze flickered to Zara, dismissal evident in his expression as he took in the small black child. I understand your concern, but I can't act on the word of a child against a trusted executive. His condescension wasn't even subtle. Perhaps you should share your concerns with Detective Powell when he returns. When will that be? Marcus demanded. He stepped out about 30 minutes ago. Mr. Whitmore needed to speak with him privately. The administrator checked his watch. I'm not sure when they'll return. Frustration and urgency built as they realized the extent to which Richard had controlled the situation. Hospital security had been positioned to limit access to Alexander's floor, with instructions to especially watch for Marcus, Imani, and Zara. As they debated their next steps in the consultation room, a white doctor walked past, barely glancing at them. Moments later, a well-dressed white woman approached the security desk with concerns similar to theirs, and the same doctor immediately stopped to address her questions, treating them with gravity and respect. The contrast wasn't lost on any of them. Marcus stepped away to make urgent calls to his police contacts, attempting to verify the recording's authentication status. Meanwhile, Zara tugged at her mother's sleeve, her expression serious. Mom, I saw Victoria come in with something small in her hand. Like a little bottle. Imani knelt to her daughter's level. Just now Zara nodded emphatically. When we were talking to that man. She walked past the waiting area. She didn't see us because she was looking at her phone, but I saw her. She had that same look from the party, like she was trying not to be noticed. Marcus rejoined them, his expression grim. My contact says the recordings are being authenticated, but it could be another hour before they have official confirmation. We don't have that kind of time. Imani relayed what Zara had observed. We need to alert hospital security immediately, she insisted. Tell them Victoria may be attempting another poisoning. They approached the security desk, where a guard listened to their concerns with visible skepticism. We'll check on Mr. Thornton's room. He finally agreed, his tone making it clear he considered this a waste of time. But Miss Lambert has proper authorization, unlike yourselves. She's going to hurt him again. Zara interjected, her young voice carrying clearly in the quiet hallway. She has poison. I saw her. The guard's expression softened slightly at Zara's obvious distress, but his response remained dismissive. Young lady, the adults are handling this. Mr. Thornton is receiving excellent care. As the guard made a perfunctory call upstairs, receiving assurance that everything was fine, Zara felt a familiar frustration building. Once again, no one was listening, and a man's life hung in the balance. While her mother and Marcus continued arguing with increasingly impatient hospital staff, Zara made a decision. She had noticed the service corridors during their previous visit, had seen how staff moved efficiently through the building, using routes invisible to visitors. With everyone's attention focused on the escalating confrontation at the security desk, she slipped away unnoticed. Finding an unattended service elevator required only moments of observation. Hospital staff used keycards to access restricted floors, but Zara noticed the service workers often held the doors for each other, more concerned with efficiency than security protocols. She positioned herself near the service entrance, waiting until a maintenance worker approached with a cart. When he swiped his card and the elevator opened, Zara timed her approach perfectly, slipping inside just as he was maneuvering his equipment through the doors. The worker, focused on his task, didn't notice the small figure pressing herself into the corner of the elevator. When the doors opened on Alexander's floor, Zara waited until the maintenance worker was distracted by a colleague before darting out into the corridor. Having overheard the room number during their previous visit, she navigated the hallways, cautiously avoiding the main nursing station. The VIP wing was quieter than regular hospital floors, with plush carpeting that muffled her footsteps. As she approached Alexander's room, she could see two security guards stationed outside, their attention focused on the main corridor rather than the service areas. Zara used her small size to advantage, crawling behind equipment carts and ducking into doorways whenever someone passed. Finally reaching a position where she could see into Alexander's room through a partially open door, what she witnessed confirmed her worst fears. Victoria stood beside Alexander's bed, a syringe in her gloved hand, as she carefully checked the IV line. Richard stood watch near the doorway, his back to Zara, as he kept an eye on the hallway. "Hurry up," he urged in a low voice. "The nurse will be back for rounds in 10 minutes. Victoria's movements were precise, professional. "This needs to look natural. A secondary stroke following the first poisoning. Completely plausible given his condition." Alexander himself lay still, his complexion pale but with subtle signs of improving health. As Victoria prepared to inject something into his IV line, his eyelids fluttered slightly. "He's waking up," Richard hissed, alarm evident in his tone. "All the more reason to finish this now," Victoria replied coldly, positioning the syringe. Zara knew shouting for help would only get her caught before anyone with authority arrived. With seconds to decide, she did the only thing that guaranteed immediate response throughout the hospital. She pulled the nearest fire alarm. The effect was instantaneous. Klaxons blared throughout the building, emergency protocols automatically activating. Victoria startled at the sudden noise, quickly concealing the syringe in her pocket as staff began responding to the alarm. Richard positioned himself as the concerned friend, immediately questioning nurses about evacuation procedures for critical patients. In the confusion, neither noticed Zara slipping back toward the service corridor. Her relief at disrupting their attempt was short-lived. A security guard spotted her near the alarm pull station, immediately drawing the conclusion that she had triggered it. "Hey, stop right there," he called, advancing quickly. Zara found herself grabbed roughly by the arm, the guard's grip painfully tight, as he radioed for backup. "I've got the kid who pulled the alarm, bringing her to security office now." Protests that Victoria and Richard were trying to hurt Alexander fell on deaf ears. The guard treated her as a troublemaker, his preconceptions about a small black child in a restricted area overriding any possibility that she might be telling the truth. In the hospital security office, two officers loomed over Zara, their questioning aggressive and intimidating. "Do you understand this is a criminal offense? Pulling fire alarms when there's no fire puts patients at risk." They made no attempt to investigate her claims about what she'd witnessed, their minds already made up about what had occurred. When Imani and Marcus finally located her, they found Zara fighting back tears as she continued insisting on what she'd seen. Victoria had a needle. She was going to put something in Mr. Thornton's tube. Marcus immediately displayed his credentials, his authoritative presence forcing the security officers to step back. "This child is a key witness in an attempted murder investigation. Your treatment of her is completely unacceptable and potentially interfering with an active police investigation." The security officers exchanged glances, their confidence wavering. "We caught her pulling the fire alarm, sir." "That's a serious offense. And did you bother investigating why she felt that was necessary?" Marcus challenged. "Did you check Mr. Thornton's room, as she suggested?" Their silence was answer enough. Before the confrontation could escalate further, Marcus received an urgent call. His expression transformed as he listened, relief washing over his features. "That was my police contact. The recordings have been authenticated. Detective Powell is on his way with warrants for Richard Whitmore and Victoria Lambert." He ended the call, turning to Imani and Zara. "They've ordered additional officers to the hospital. We need to get back upstairs immediately." The security officers, now uncertain about their position, didn't resist as Marcus led Imani and Zara from the office. In the hallway, he briefed them quickly. The fire alarm disrupted whatever Victoria was planning. "My security team reported that both she and Richard left Alexander's room separately during the commotion. We need to locate them before they realize the police are coming." As they hurried toward the elevators, Imani kept Zara close, her expression a mixture of pride and concern. "You were incredibly brave," she whispered to her daughter. "But please don't disappear like that again. I was terrified something had happened to you." Zara nodded, understanding her mother's fear, even as she remained convinced she'd done the only possible thing. Their return to Alexander's floor revealed a changed situation. The fire alarm had been reset, but the disruption had altered normal procedures. Medical staff were conducting additional checks on all patients, and security was more visible throughout the wing. Of Victoria and Richard, however, there was no sign. As they approached Alexander's room, they found two police officers now stationed outside Detective Powell himself, emerging from within. His expression upon seeing them was complicated, reluctant acknowledgement, mixing with lingering skepticism. "Bennett," he acknowledged Marcus with a nod. "We've secured Mr. Thornton's room. No sign of tampering with his IV, but the nurse reported it had been recently changed, supposedly on doctor's orders that weren't properly logged." He hesitated before adding, "Preliminary testing shows traces of potassium chloride on the replaced tubing. In high doses, it would have caused cardiac arrest." His gaze shifted to Zara, something like respect finally entering his expression. "The alarm was a smart move, kid. Probably saved his life." Again, Zara accepted this validation with simple dignity, beyond caring about this man's approval after all she'd experienced. "Where are Victoria and Richard?" Marcus asked urgently. "We've got officers searching the building, but no sign of them yet. Hospital security is reviewing camera footage." Powell's radio crackled with an update. After listening, his expression hardened. "Lambert was spotted entering the east stairwell 2 minutes ago. Whitmore's location still unknown." Marcus made a quick decision. "I'll take the stairs. You coordinate the search for Whitmore." To Imani, he added, "Stay with the officers here. You'll be safe." Before he could leave, Imani stopped him. "Be careful. These people have already tried to kill twice. They won't hesitate to hurt anyone who gets in their way." Marcus nodded, his expression determined as he headed for the stairwell. Left with the police officers, Imani and Zara watched as hospital security implemented lockdown procedures, restricting movement between floors. Minutes stretched with agonizing slowness as they awaited news. Then from somewhere in the building came the sound of shouting, followed by the thunder of running feet. The confrontation had begun. The east stairwell of Manhattan Memorial Hospital echoed with footsteps as Marcus descended rapidly, radio in hand, as he coordinated with security teams throughout the building. "Suspect last seen on 5th floor stairwell heading down," crackled a voice through the device. "All exits being monitored." Marcus moved with practiced efficiency, his years of security training evident in every calculated movement. 3 flights below, he caught a glimpse of blonde hair as Victoria rounded the landing, moving with surprising speed for someone in business attire. "Victoria Lambert," he called out, his voice resonating in the concrete enclosure. "Police are securing all exits. It's over." Victoria paused, glancing up at Marcus before continuing her descent. "Nothing's over until I say it is," she replied, her voice eerily calm despite the circumstances. Marcus increased his pace, closing the distance between them. As he reached the landing where he'd last seen her, a fire door slammed shut 1 floor below. Following through it, he entered a service corridor lined with linen carts and medical supplies. The hallway stretched in both directions, momentarily empty, save for a single orderly at the far end. "Which way did she go?" Marcus called to the man displaying his security credentials. The orderly pointed left without hesitation. "Blonde lady in the gray suit. Just ran that way. Seemed in a hurry." The corridor led to a secondary lobby, serving the hospital's outpatient surgery center, now largely empty, as evening visiting hours ended. Marcus scanned the space, noting all possible exits. A flash of movement caught his eye. Victoria slipping through doors leading to the hospital's eastern parking structure. He followed, pushing through the doors just in time to see her attempting to unlock a black sedan. "Security has the building surrounded, Victoria," he called, approaching cautiously. "Detective Powell has the recording where you and Richard discussed poisoning Alexander. We have the physical evidence from both attempts. Cooperating now is your only option." Victoria turned to face him, her composed, professional demeanor transformed by rage and desperation. "You understand nothing," she spat, abandoning pretense. "Do you know what Alexander Thornton has done to communities like mine? His company destroyed my family's neighborhood, forced us out for urban renewal that meant luxury condos we could never afford. My grandmother died because of the stress of being displaced after 40 years in her home." Her voice cracked with genuine emotion. She called it her heartbreaking, but I call it what it was: murder through gentrification. Richard just gave me the means to get justice. Marcus kept his distance, recognizing the dangerous unpredictability of someone cornered. "And the money he offered didn't factor into your decision." Victoria's laugh was bitter. "Of course it did. Why shouldn't I profit while delivering justice? Thornton has destroyed countless lives building his empire. He doesn't get to suddenly develop a conscience and be forgiven." She reached into her pocket, causing Marcus to tense, but what she withdrew was her phone. "You think you're the only one with recordings. Richard didn't know I was documenting everything. Insurance policy." She held up the device. "I have years of Alexander's business practices documented here. The corners cut the bribes, paid the communities deliberately targeted because they lacked political power to resist development. His recent redemption doesn't erase decades of exploitation." Before Marcus could respond, the parking structure door opened behind him. Imani appeared slightly out of breath from having followed him. "The police found Richard trying to leave through the loading dock," she reported. "They're bringing him in now." Her presence distracted Marcus momentarily, long enough for Victoria to see an opportunity. In one fluid motion, she grabbed Zara, who had followed closely behind her mother despite instructions to stay with the officers. Victoria pulled the small girl against her, retrieving the syringe from her pocket and holding it threateningly. "Back off, both of you," she demanded, her desperation evident. "I'm walking out of here, or this child gets what was meant for Thornton." Zara remained remarkably calm despite the syringe hovering near her neck. Her eyes met her mother's, communicating without words. Imani raised her hands placatingly. "Victoria, please. She's just a child. She has nothing to do with any of this." "She has everything to do with this," Victoria countered. "If not for her, Alexander would already be dead and justice served. Now step aside and let me pass." Marcus moved slowly, positioning himself between Victoria and the exit while keeping his hands visible. "Think about what you're doing, Victoria. You're talking about harming a 6-year-old child. Whatever justification you had against Alexander, this crosses a line you can't uncross." Victoria's hand trembled slightly, conflict evident in her expression. Sometimes innocents get caught in the crossfire. Thornton never cared about the children displaced by his developments. "But you're not Thornton," Imani said softly, her voice steady despite her terror. "You said you wanted justice because of what happened to your family, your grandmother. Would she want you to harm a child to escape responsibility?" Something in Victoria's resolve wavered. In that moment of hesitation, Zara acted on instinct, remembering the self-defense moves from the community center class her mother had insisted she attend. She stomped hard on Victoria's instep, while simultaneously driving her elbow backward into her captor's midsection. Victoria's grip loosened enough for Zara to twist away, the syringe clattering to the concrete floor where it shattered its contents, spilling harmlessly. Marcus moved immediately, restraining Victoria, while Imani rushed to embrace Zara, checking her for any injuries. Before Victoria could attempt further resistance, the parking structure door burst open again, revealing Detective Powell and 2 uniformed officers. "Victoria Lambert, you're under arrest for the attempted murder of Alexander Thornton and the assault and kidnapping of a minor." Powell announced, his previous skepticism replaced by grim certainty. As the officers took custody of Victoria, reading her rights while securing her in handcuffs, Imani held Zara tightly. "Are you okay, baby? Did she hurt you?" Zara shook her head, remarkably composed given the circumstances. "I'm okay, Mom. I remembered what Miss Jackson taught us in safety class. If someone grabs you, make yourself a hard target." Relief gave way to fierce pride in Imani's expression. "You were so brave, braver than anyone should ever have to be." Meanwhile, in Alexander's hospital room, a different confrontation was unfolding. Richard Whitmore, having been apprehended attempting to flee, was brought face to face with the consequences of his actions. Alexander Thornton had regained consciousness during the commotion caused by the fire alarm. Though weak, he was alert enough to recognize his longtime business partner being led into the room in handcuffs. Richard Alexander acknowledged, his voice raspy from the breathing tube recently removed. "They're saying you tried to kill me. Twice." Richard's normally commanding presence had diminished, his shoulders slumped in defeat as the evidence mounted against him. Still, defiance flashed in his eyes. "You were going to destroy everything we built," he responded bitterly. 30 years of business strategy abandoned for what? Some misguided guilt trip about communities we legally developed. Alexander studied the man he'd considered a friend for decades. Not guilt, Richard, responsibility. There's a difference. He shifted slightly in the hospital bed, wincing at the movement. "I wanted to transform our legacy into something meaningful, something that repaired damage instead of causing more. By giving away billions that rightfully belong to shareholders, to us," Richard's voice rose with indignation. "You had no right to unilaterally decide that." A sad smile crossed Alexander's pale features. "Actually, as majority shareholder, I had every legal right. What I didn't have was your support, which I foolishly thought might be forthcoming once you understood my vision." Detective Powell, who had returned after processing Victoria's arrest, interrupted their exchange. "Mr. Thornton, we need your statement regarding recent events. Are you well enough to provide it now?" Alexander nodded weakly. "I'm told a child saved my life. Twice. I'd like to speak with her." Powell hesitated. "The young witness is with her mother. I can arrange for them to visit once you've rested." Now Detective Alexander insisted, a flash of his executive authority, returning despite his weakened state. "I understand I owe her my life. I need to thank her personally." As Richard was escorted from the room by officers, his final glare at Alexander communicated the depth of his sense of betrayal. Moments later, Marcus arrived with Imani and Zara in tow, having been summoned by the detective. Alexander's eyes widened slightly as they entered, taking in the small girl who had defied all expectations and prejudices to save a stranger who represented a world that had likely never shown her kindness. "You must be Zara," he said softly. "I understand I owe you my life. Twice over." Zara approached the bed, cautiously studying the man she had risked so much to save. "You look better than before," she observed with childlike directness. "When you were on the floor at the party, your face was all blue." A surprised chuckle escaped Alexander, triggering a brief coughing fit. When he recovered, he extended a hand to Zara, who took it after a reassuring nod from her mother. "I want to thank you," he said, his voice carrying unexpected emotion. "Not just for saving my life, but for showing me something important." "What's that?" Zara asked curiously. Alexander's eyes, tired but clear, met hers directly. "That I've been wrong about many things, including who deserves to be heard in this world." He looked past Zara to include Imani in his gaze. "I'm sorry for how you were treated at the gala, and afterward. There's no excuse for it." Imani's expression remained guarded, years of experience, making her wary of easy apologies from powerful white men. "It's not just about how we were treated," she replied carefully. "It's about systems that automatically dismiss certain voices while amplifying others." Alexander nodded slowly. "You're absolutely right, and that's something I intend to address, starting with my own company and foundation." He turned back to Zara. "You spoke truth when no one would listen. You persisted when everyone dismissed you. That kind of courage deserves recognition." His gaze shifted to Marcus. "I understand you've been coordinating security for them. Thank you for believing when others wouldn't." Marcus nodded respectfully. Zara saw clearly what many adults missed, "Sir. I just listened." Detective Powell, who had been observing this exchange with growing discomfort, cleared his throat. "We'll need formal statements from everyone involved." "The district attorney is already preparing charges against Mr. Whitmore and Miss Lambert." Alexander waved a hand weakly. "That can wait until morning. These people have been through enough tonight." He looked again at Zara, something like wonder in his expression. A child's voice, ignored by an entire room of powerful adults, turned out to be the only one speaking truth. There's a lesson there that I won't forget. 3 weeks later, the grand ballroom of the Westbrook Hotel had been transformed once again, though this time for a different purpose. Where the Montgomery Foundation Gala had showcased wealth and exclusivity, today's press conference emphasized transparency and inclusion. Chairs were arranged in a semicircle, facing a modest podium, with space allocated for community representatives alongside corporate executives and media personnel. Alexander Thornton, still showing signs of his ordeal, but standing unassisted, approached the microphone as cameras flashed and reporters readied their recording devices. "Thank you all for coming." Today he began, his voice stronger than it had been in the hospital, but carrying new notes of humility. 3 weeks ago, in this very room, I experienced two life-changing events. First, I was the target of a poisoning attempt that would have ended my life if not for intervention. Second, and more significantly, I was saved by the courage of a child who refused to be silenced, despite every social and systemic barrier placed in her way. He gestured toward the front row where Zara sat between Imani and Marcus, the little girl, dressed in a new yellow dress for the occasion. Zara Matthews saw what was happening when no one else did. She spoke up when doing so only brought her ridicule and dismissal. And when faced with a system designed to ignore voices like hers, she persisted with extraordinary courage until the truth was finally heard. The assembled press corps, initially gathered for updates on the sensational attempted murder of a billionaire CEO, found themselves witnessing something unexpected: a powerful man publicly acknowledging his own role in perpetuating systems of inequality. The investigation into the events of that night has been extensively covered by the media, Alexander continued. Richard Whitmore and Victoria Lambert have been charged with attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, and numerous other offenses. Their trial will begin next month, and I intend to testify fully about their actions. He paused, gathering strength for what came next. But today I want to address something deeper than individual criminal acts. I want to talk about the systemic failures that nearly cost me my life, failures that I myself have perpetuated throughout my career. Murmurs rippled through the assembled journalists as Alexander departed from expected corporate damage control. When Zara Matthews first warned about poison in my drink, she was immediately dismissed. Not because her warning lacked credibility, but because of who she was. A young black child in a room full of wealthy, predominantly white adults who had been conditioned to see her as invisible at best and a disruption at worst. He looked directly at Zara as he continued. That prejudice nearly cost me my life. But more importantly, it revealed how deeply ingrained these biases are in our institutions and in ourselves. For the next several minutes, Alexander outlined what the investigation had uncovered. Richard and Victoria had indeed conspired to poison him before he could implement his planned restructuring of Thornton Industries. Victoria's motivation combined financial gain with revenge for her grandmother's displacement during one of Thornton's early development projects. Richard had simply been unwilling to relinquish control or profits to Alexander's new vision for the company. The irony, Alexander noted with a sad smile, is that Victoria didn't know I had already recognized the damage my company had caused to communities like hers. My planned changes were in part an attempt to address those historical wrongs. He then unveiled the changes that would be implemented at Thornton Industries moving forward. The company would establish a $10 billion fund for affordable housing in neighborhoods previously impacted by their developments. A new division focused on community impact and racial equity would be created with Imani Matthews appointed as its director. Educational scholarships for minority students would be expanded with a special program named after Zara, focusing on supporting children interested in law enforcement, medicine, and security professions. These changes aren't charity, Alexander emphasized. They're restoration. They're recognition that true success can't be built on exploitation and exclusion. As the press conference continued, reporters directed questions not only to Alexander, but also to Imani and Marcus, who had accepted leadership positions within the restructured organization. Zara, though not formally participating, occasionally whispered observations to her mother that proved insightful enough for Imani to share with the group. The little girl's perspective, so recently dismissed, was now being actively sought. Near the end of the event, Alexander revealed the most profound truth that had emerged from the entire ordeal. "I want to share something I haven't told anyone except my closest advisors," he said, his voice quieting the room. "My journey toward change began months before the poisoning attempt after I witnessed an incident that haunts me still." He described being present at a construction site where a young black child had tried to warn workers about an unsafe condition. The child was ignored and subsequently injured when the very danger they had identified caused an accident. "I did nothing," Alexander admitted, visible emotion in his voice. "I saw the child being dismissed, had my own momentary doubt about whether they should be listened to, and remained silent. That child died from their injuries 3 days later." A heavy silence fell over the ballroom. "My guilt over that inaction led me to visit the Racial Violence Memorial where my granddaughter Sarah saw me crying. It pushed me to examine other aspects of my life and business where I had remained complicit in injustice through inaction or active participation." He looked directly at Zara again. "When you tried to warn me about the poison, Zara, you gave me a second chance that I didn't give that child. You not only saved my physical life, you completed a moral redemption I had already begun but might never have finished without you." The press conference concluded with the announcement of the Montgomery Foundation's new direction, now co-chaired by Imani, and featuring a diverse board that included community leaders from areas impacted by Thornton's past developments. As cameras continued to flash and reporters clamored for additional comments, Alexander stepped away from the podium to approach Zara directly. Kneeling to her level, despite the effort it clearly cost him in his still recovering state, he spoke to her quietly away from the microphones. "Thank you," he said simply, "for saving my life, but more importantly for saving my soul." Zara, with the directness of childhood, replied, "You're welcome. But you should thank my mom, too. She taught me to always tell the truth, even when grown-ups don't want to hear it." Alexander smiled, nodding in acknowledgement to Imani. "Your mother is an extraordinary woman who raised an extraordinary daughter. I'm fortunate that both of you are now part of Thornton's future." The aftermath of these events rippled outward in expanding circles of change. The story of a 6-year-old black girl saving a billionaire's life captured national attention, sparking discussions about whose voices society values and why. Schools invited Zara to speak about the importance of speaking truth, regardless of who will listen. Alexander implemented sweeping changes at Thornton Industries, addressing racial disparities in hiring, promotion, and community impact. Marcus was promoted to Chief Security Officer for all Thornton properties, implementing new protocols that emphasized listening to concerns from all sources, regardless of who raised them. The most meaningful changes, however, occurred at the personal level. 2 months after the press conference, Zara began attending the same private school as Alexander's granddaughter Sarah, their friendship bridging worlds, previously separated by wealth, race, and opportunity. Imani led the new Community Advisory Board with actual power to direct company resources, ensuring that community voices shaped development rather than being displaced by it. 6 months after the poisoning attempt on a crisp autumn morning, Zara stood beside Alexander at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the newly established Defenders Community Center in Victoria's grandmother's former neighborhood. The center, built on land where luxury condominiums had been planned, would provide educational resources, healthcare access, and economic opportunity to residents at risk of displacement from gentrification. As Alexander prepared to cut the ribbon, he surprised everyone by instead handing the scissors to Zara. "This center exists because one child refused to be silenced," he explained to the gathered crowd. "It's only fitting that she should open its doors." Zara accepted the oversized scissors with solemn dignity. Before cutting the ribbon, she addressed the onlookers in a clear voice that carried surprising authority for someone so young. "My mom always taught me that when you see something wrong, you have to say something even if nobody believes you at first," she said. "This place is for everyone who needs to be heard." With those words, she cut the ribbon, officially opening the center as applause erupted from the diverse crowd of community members, corporate executives, and media representatives. Later that afternoon, as the celebration continued inside the center, Zara noticed a building inspector overlooking critical safety features in the playground equipment being installed outside. Without hesitation, she approached the man, pointing out the issue with confidence. This time, something remarkable happened. The inspector knelt to her level, listened carefully to her concerns, and immediately called the installation team to address the problem. Alexander, observing this interaction from a distance, smiled with satisfaction. The world hadn't changed completely, but in this small corner of it, a child's voice now carried the weight it always should have. The most profound truth revealed wasn't about corporate conspiracy or attempted murder. It was the simple recognition that wisdom and perception exist in unexpected places, and that justice requires hearing all voices, especially those society has conditioned us to ignore. Have you ever witnessed someone being ignored simply because of who they are, even when they were speaking truth? Type your thoughts in the comments below. If Zara's courage and persistence inspired you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories about everyday heroes challenging injustice. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that speaking truth matters even when the world isn't ready to listen. Thank you for joining us on this journey through prejudice, courage, and transformation. Remember, sometimes the most powerful voice in the room belongs to the person everyone else is trying to silence. Zara's story teaches us that wisdom often comes from unexpected sources. When a 6-year-old black girl recognized danger that adults missed, she confronted not just individual prejudice, but systemic bias that renders certain voices invisible. The true tragedy wasn't merely the assassination attempt, but how easily Zara was dismissed because of who she was. The adults in this story failed repeatedly, prioritizing assumptions over observation. They showcased how prejudice operates not always through overt hatred, but through the subtle dismissal of those deemed less credible based on appearance, age, or background. Their blindness nearly cost Alexander his life. Zara's persistence reminds us that speaking truth requires extraordinary courage when systems are designed to silence you. She refused to become invisible despite every adult telling her to disappear. Her resilience wasn't just admirable, it was necessary for justice. Alexander's journey demonstrates that redemption begins with listening. His transformation wasn't complete until he recognized the voices he'd been programmed to ignore. True change requires more than guilt. It demands concrete action to dismantle the systems that perpetuate inequality. The most powerful lesson is that justice depends on whose voices we value. When we dismiss people based on appearance or status, we don't just harm them, we blind ourselves to crucial truths that might save us all. Has someone ever dismissed your voice when you knew you were right? Or have you witnessed someone being ignored simply because of who they are? Share your experience in the comments below. We can learn from each other's stories of being unheard. If Zara's courage inspired you, hit that like button to help this message reach others who need to hear it. Sometimes one small action can create ripples of change that transform lives. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that challenge us to examine the biases limiting our perspective. Each subscription helps us continue bringing these important narratives to light. Know someone struggling to be heard. Share this video with them as a reminder that their truth matters even when the world isn't ready to listen. Thank you for joining us on this journey through prejudice, courage, and redemption. May we all find the wisdom to listen to the Zaras in our lives, recognizing that sometimes the most important voice in the room belongs to the person everyone else is trying to silence.